Hello and welcome to The Promised Land, a show about Manchester United and part of the 90 Min podcast network. People are telling me that they can tell my mood by the way I introduce the show.
I can.
And as you might maybe gather, things are a little bit more positive than the last show. I'm Scott Saunders, joined by Rob Blanchette as ever. Rob, FA Cup final for Manchester United. Feeling better?
Yes, definitely. That was the antidote, wasn't it, to Sevilla? So it was one of those games, wasn't it, where Brighton, you know what they bring, and I think they brought it. You saw their individual brilliance, and I think their team play. And if you didn't turn up yesterday, you get very beaten. This is kind of as simple as that. And I think Brighton have, they've had a fabulous season. They wouldn't have looked out of place in the cup final, but a really, really solid, strong professional performance from Manchester United. Some really good displays in there, and of course, a delightful way to win at Wembley with a penalty shootout. And then, as that ball goes in the net, you run round like Wout Weghorst. You give the kiss of death to that ball, and then you run to the United fans and do a knee slide of about 20 feet. Where don't get injured, but in that moment, and it was a fantastic memory, and that's what football is all about, isn't it? Is making those memories.
That's the fastest I've ever seen him run, I think.
It was like Usain Bolt. I've never seen him like, and it's so funny that all the United fans run towards Lindelof, or the United players run towards Lindelof, and he just goes, "No, I'm going this way." It's like Forrest Gump or something. But a really, really good game of football. You know, two strong teams who wanted to win, and now, of course, the prize is to potentially stop Manchester City doing the treble.
No, the prize is to win the FA Cup, Rob. It's not to stop City.
It is to win the FA Cup, Scott. But I keep always saying this about the cup competitions, about what they really mean and how you take it forward. Lovely bit of silverware. We all love the FA Cups, and it's a very pretty thing. But let's be completely honest. Stopping Manchester City winning the treble will be the same as Man United stopping Liverpool doing the treble in 1977. It gets remembered forever. The trophy bit doesn't. What gets remembered is that you turned up that day and you stopped them. So Manchester City are probably the best team in the world at the moment, aren't they? So this is the challenge. Man United are not the best team in the world. So it's going to be, I think, kind of a David and Goliath situation where United have to really bring their performance of the season, already being billed the most important Manchester derby of all time. And I believe it is.
Yeah, fair case for that, to be fair. You said it at the start of the show, Rob. I think United had to turn up. And I think that was the big thing for me, having seen United go into a bunch of games this season and get trounced and lose really in really embarrassing fashion. And that happened again on Thursday. I think Erik ten Hag actually called that the worst performance of this season. And there's been some really bad ones.
Yeah.
But what we did see was, you can tell the players are tired. You can tell that the players have had a lot of games. I think United have played something 50 plus games. Brighton have played 53 versus 37 games, I think. So, that's what you're up against. Those amount of minutes in your legs, injuries galore, injuries everywhere. But turning up and actually being committed, and I wanted to say this, even if United had lost yesterday, I'd been fine with it, based on if they'd have lost 1-0 in 90 minutes, if they'd have given up a goal in extra time, if they'd have lost on penalties. The way that they played is the bare minimum. And we should be expecting that level of commitment every time. You can, like, tactical shortcomings, this kind of thing, you can work on it. But as long as the required effort is there, not many United fans really will have much of an issue. I know in 2 years' time, you'd be expecting Man United to be at their very, very final form and expecting them to be the Man United that we all know. But it's a road back to that. And you have to simply put the effort in. And they did yesterday. And they should be praised for that.
You turn up to the office, you've got to do a day's work. That's really kind of how it is. And I think that's always been the long-term debate at Manchester United about whether players care or not. And I don't always subscribe to that, Scott. Even when it doesn't go right, people are always like, oh, do the players care? And there are times when you can ask that question. I don't think they went to Sevilla and went, well, we don't care. We're going to turn up here and get beaten. But the prerequisite for every performance, as you said, is to go there, be professional, do your job. And if you do your job, then whatever unfolds, you can kind of work with it afterwards, can't you? So I'm with you on that. Like I felt the performance not just warranted a victory, because I think it was slim between the two teams. I think they were very, very samey, and Brighton were better than United in some parts of the park. But United definitely turned up, and there's no debate on that. And that has to be what you do going forward, isn't it? Even look at Arsenal in the run in here. Arsenal have gone from being title challengers, they're going to win the title, they've had a great season, everyone's had individual seasons of brilliance and all of this. But if they run out of gas at the end of the season, it won't be because they want to lose. You know what I mean? I don't think Man United want to lose either. But Erik ten Hag now has to instill this kind of discipline and metal into his team and really push the boat on that over the summer, because that's still the bit, isn't it? It's still kind of with United, is it's just a little bit hit or miss. Sevilla, you didn't turn up, you didn't do your job. Turn up at Wembley and you just a Victor Lindelof penalty is the difference. It's as simple as that over the kind of course of 120 minutes. So now a good performance by United, but a really good victory, because I think they'll come out of this feeling that if they had been a tiny bit off against this Brighton team, they would have lost this game. There's no doubt about it. I don't feel sorry for Brighton, but I think they would have deserved to get the cup final this season. They've been so good, and I think they're probably the second best ball playing team in the country after City, and they're probably on level, I'd say, with Arsenal technically, with some of that stuff, some of their players. We're not quite there. We're not as technically good as Brighton, but we brought it on the day. We showed our big game attitude.
You mentioned the Arsenal. We haven't done this conversation on this pod, but it has been floating around. Let's say Man United win one trophy and come third, and Arsenal don't win the league. Who's had a better season?
Arsenal. I judge all of this by the week-to-week rigmarole of the Premier League. So if Arsenal run out of steam at the end of this now because their players are young and they've now suddenly got some injuries and key positions are not working, Saliba's out, you've got Rob Holding in, I would still say that Arsenal, if the season ended today, have had the superior season. I know that trophies pay the bills, and I know that fans want trophies to grab the bragging rights. But Man United have a League Cup, say, and lose an FA Cup, and Arsenal get nothing out of the season in terms of trophies. I think you have to look at the body of work over 50, 60 games, because that's what you've got to take next year going forward to get better. And that's why I would say Arsenal are. So bragging rights, yes, Scott, I get it. Like, fans are going to be completely binary about that. Oh, we won a trophy. I'm not as bothered about those things. I want to win the big two in the years to come, and I want to win it repeatedly. I want the Premier League and I want the Champions League. And everything after that, Scott, is dust. It really is. It's just bragging about a day out here and there. So, like, even yesterday at Wembley, I don't think semi-final should be at Wembley. I'd like to see that restored, that the final game is played at the Showpiece Stadium, and that's what you do. But you get there, don't you? You got to win. You turn up at Wembley. It's a day out, and you've got to prove it against a really good side in Brighton. So that's how I look at it. I know that's going to get turfed out loads now about who's had better seasons and whatnot. But I think Arsenal this year, for maybe 30 games overall, maybe the best team in the world up until that point. To go from being, what were they last year, mid-table at some point, pushing towards Europa, to then jumping to being the best team in the world and the best team with, say, Napoli in Europe. That's an amazing achievement this year, and no doubt silverware should be the marker of that. If they win the Premier League this year, all credit to them, but they're not going to win it. Man City are. That's the truth. City have the pedigree that Arsenal don't, and that's what counts in the final run-in. Always, the team with the pedigree generally does it. So I think only the year Leicester won it, the teams around them also didn't have the pedigree. It was really about Leicester's motivation. But it's happened with United loads. In that run-in, it's the pedigree that counts in those final 6 or 7 games, and I'm not quite sure. Rob Holding's not going to get the job done. It's just as simple as that. Holding versus Haaland, don't even bother turning up. Sorry, Arsenal fans. But that's what they have to solve going forward, isn't it? It's like the same conversation we have about Maguire. It's, you've got to have better players, and they've got to be consistent. What do you think, Scott? What do you think? You tell me.
I see the progress.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah,
but you failed. That's kind of how I look at it. Arteta's season 3 or 4 versus Erik ten Hag's first.
Yeah, totally. That's fair in the sense that I think like Ten Hag's first season, and we will no doubt do a season recap show later on down the line. It's outstanding. Even if you go and get hammered in the FA Cup final now and you get fourth and it's a bit of a damp squib going into the end of the campaign, year one of a project for the most dysfunctional football club in the universe who are trying to sell the football
Chelsea
club.
now, man.
Well, it's Chelsea now. They've kind of stolen our crown, haven't they? But let's be honest, Manchester United for 10 years have been an absolute joke. And we've just had to work around that joke as kind of fans and journalists. That's what it is. But in year one, this has been an incredible achievement. And to me, it's not about winning the League Cup. The League Cup as the silverware is not the barometer. The barometer is what you see with your eyes, the football. And United are a much better football team than they were 12 months ago. Arsenal, I think, as well, jumped levels. But no, I wouldn't call it a failure. You might call it a failure, and then there's no doubt other fans would call it a failure.
In the context of it, like I'm not saying that them ascending to the levels that they've reached is a failure. What I'm saying is when you're in that position with one target, let's bear in mind that all the other competitions they've thrown out the window in order to win the league.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a fairer comment if Arsenal were completely healthy. But at this time of the season, no one is, are they really? But there's a difference where Man City can fill in with a Phil Foden and absolutely look like nothing is different because that's how good their squad is. And the depth has taken 7 years to build that squad. And Arsenal are in year 3 of that build. And you can see that there are still problem positions. There's a big difference when if Saliba's not there. You think it's Saliba's first proper season for Arsenal here, isn't it? And he's been amazing. But you've got Rob Holding there now. I would not be confident. If I'm Arteta, I'm thinking, how do I keep the ball away from him? But that's just what you've got to deal with, isn't it? So that, to me, it would be a huge disappointment if I was an Arsenal fan not winning the title. And, I might be crying into my cornflakes for a few weeks. But overall, I think the body work that they've done this year is massively impressive and means that going into future seasons, you've only got to add maybe 1 or 2 or 3 now to get really good, to get to kind of City consistency level and pad that squad out. That's the way I kind of look at it. And that's the same with Man United. I think we know there's lots of changes still needed at United, but they've jumped levels probably in a way that they shouldn't have deserved to. Like when you look at the personnel, like we still have the same debates about the same players, don't we? Being the same level of rubbish at times. And the consistency. But I think Arsenal as well, they've made that leap with a bunch of young players. And for me as well, that always gives you extra credit in the bank. For me, I always think, that shows that a project is succeeding. So I definitely wouldn't call it a failure. I'd call it a disappointment if City won the title.
I got some serious abuse on Friday for a video we put out suggesting that I said Arsenal were not locked in for top 4 next season. The only team locked in are Man City. And it'll turn to a top 5. Yeah. Oh, well, Arsenal fans don't think so. Anyway.
Why I say it's fair, if you have a season, like say you start next season, say Martinelli is out for 6 months with an injury, and say then Saka's gone for whatever reason, then you lose Odegaard, you're probably not coming top 4. It's as easy as that. A few injuries and a drop of form and maybe a little bit of tactical mismanagement from the manager at times, changing things. We saw Tottenham yesterday decide that they're going to play 4-3-3 when they haven't played it all season long. And what happens? Teams walk through you. So those things can happen even to good teams. So I don't think they're locked in for top 4. I don't think anyone is. I wouldn't say United are locked in for top 4.
That was my point, yeah.
I think the only team maybe locked in, you would say, are Man City, because even on their worst day, they could still beat you and they could still accumulate an incredible amount of points when they're not playing good football. So they're probably the only team I think that you could definitely say were top 4 standard for next year.
Take that, Twitter. Anyway, let's look back to the game yesterday. Any players you want to single out for praise?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was that kind of game where we were singling out players for criticism against Sevilla. I think there were definitely a few candidates yesterday. So let's start with those 2 centre-backs. So Victor Lindelof, player that I've given a ton of criticism to over many, many years for his lack of pace and his lack of anything and his lack of bravery at times, I say. I thought he was brilliant yesterday. Really, really good. Did his job well. Knew what he had to do. But the guy next to him playing left centre-back was as good as left-sided centre-back play I've seen this season from any player in any league. It was brilliant. Luke Shaw, coverage, ball movement, ball progression, driving, marking, everything. He did everything almost perfect. He was for me. I think if Lindelof was a 9 out of 10, Luke Shaw was a 10 out of 10 for me yesterday. And that performance just settled the future nerves, Scott, of the next few weeks, because we know that Martinez and we know that Varane are not going to be around. You're going to have to deal with it.
Varane might be back.
Varane might be back, but I think the smart thing to do is just forget about him for now. Like, if he comes back, brilliant. But I'm happier with Lindelof next to Shaw and Luke Shaw running the centre-back and running that defence. And if he can do that at that level, you'll have to ask in weeks and months to come, why is Gareth Southgate not playing him as your centre-back? Because you probably could get away with that. You wouldn't need Harry Maguire there. Harry Maguire gets picked when he doesn't even play for Man United. So Luke Shaw, I think, not that he's going to turn into a centre-back. He's infinitely a better left-back. We know this. But what an option to have. If he can play to that level for the rest of the season, and Lindelof can as well, it means that back three with David De Gea, those three in the middle, they're going to win you matches through what they do as opposed to losing them in Sevilla. And let's hope, touch wood, that you don't have to start Harry Maguire in some of these bigger games coming forward, because I do think it's a problem. I think you saw yesterday, Scott, there were situations that manifested that if Maguire had been there, might have ended up in a goal. And that's not to just take a pot shot at him. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I agree completely. I think there's a reason why Erik ten Hag wants a left footer at left centre back.
Yeah.
And he will go out of his way to make it happen. Just the balance that it offers is immeasurably different. It really is in an Erik ten Hag system. Mm-hmm. I think Lindelof and Maguire, they played together so often and had so much damage during games that they played together that we've seen time and again, even before Ten Hag, that it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And as damning an indictment as it is to say that Man United paid 80 million for Harry Maguire as the club captain, and you are thinking, I prefer to play a left back ahead of you in your position. That is just the case. I'm not sure too many people would disagree with that. They just looked a lot more solid, a lot more sturdy, and even like when Casemiro gets back up to speed, because I don't know whether you think this is a fair comment, but he's not been right since he's come back.
No,
he played all right at Forest, obviously, but that was Forest. They kind of give you the entire pitch. Casemiro, he looks a bit off, but also at the same time, he hasn't played football for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And it does take him some time to get up to speed. It took him time to get up to speed at the start of the season as well.
Yeah, I'm not going to give Casemiro any kind of excuse out of it. Casemiro wasn't particularly good yesterday, I don't think. And I think that this diving in thing, for me, is a massive issue. Stay on your feet. There's no way that the manager is telling him to risk stuff in and around the centre circle in the way that he is risking it. So it's stupid, isn't it, Scott? Can you imagine if you got sent off yesterday and got another ban? Like and he was close, wasn't he? You've only got to slip once into one of those tackles. And like, again, I think some of the refereeing yesterday was absolutely like mind-boggling and so bad. Then you're off again. So for me, you're right. He does look a yard off at the moment, but you with him, you're better with him still. He's the number 6. There's no one else who can do the number 6 function really like he can, but you can see that he's not quite there. And maybe, as you said, like these 8 games that he's had as his ban, it hasn't actually benefited him. Maybe he's one of these players that needs to keep playing minutes to stay at his highest levels, because he looks a bit jaded to me. He looks a bit soft and a bit slow, and that is, it's not what you need at this point of the season. But he's definitely going to start no matter what. You haven't really got another option in there. You've got to keep playing him.
Just haven't done this yet. So subscribe wherever you get your pods, on Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. Leave us comments on YouTube as well. Subscribe to the channel. Do all the business. Put the notification bell on. Subscribe. Leave a comment. Just a word for you. We're recording on Monday today. We usually do Tuesdays and Fridays. Recording on Monday. We'll also release a show on Wednesday, which is a bit more forward-looking. And we'll do a Friday show as well, looking back to the Spurs game, which is on Thursday night. So 3 shows this week, because we missed one a couple of weeks ago. You can follow us on Twitter as well, @_Scott Saunders, @_Rob_B, and @PromiseandMU for the show. Now, so let's say United have a first-choice centre-back pairing that they've just discovered for the next few weeks. They have a goalkeeper as well. I know you're very keen to, as you would say, give him his flowers, Rob. So do your bit on David De Gea.
Yeah, look, I think De Gea yesterday made 2 or 3 absolute world-class saves. Peter Schmeichel was in the studio after the game talking about it. And of course, Schmeichel's a goalkeeper, so he's gonna be more pro a goalkeeper than not, isn't he? But he was talking about the save, the one that went through actually Fred's legs from the edge of the box that was in the bottom corner, and De Gea has to kind of almost dive backwards just to get his hand on it and push it around the post. And I think that goalkeeping is, we are very obsessed as a culture now in this country, football wise, of goalkeepers playing out from the back. And it's absolutely the most important part of their wider game now in the years ahead. We know this. It's the way the game's gone. We know De Gea is not good at that. David De Gea still, in that moment, turns up and makes that big save. And I think, like you said before, Scott, and I think this is a wide-ranging opinion about goalkeepers, is that, well, it's their job to save the ball, isn't it? But it is a dying art, and talking to goalkeepers over many years and what they're supposed to do, you have to be so mentally strong in those sticks, and you can't get one thing wrong. If you get one thing wrong at Man United, it's literally a week's worth of headlines, and that's what De Gea has had this week. So credit to the lad. He turned up on the day. All right, wasn't great in the penalty shootout, but neither was Robert Sanchez. It's just what it is. But I think overall in that game, 2 or 3 really massive saves. That means that you don't just win the game, but you might have lost it more convincingly. You might have lost that game 2 or 3-0, and then we're talking about how great Brighton are and how terrible Man United have been. So, no, credit to De Gea on the day. He did the job, and that's all he can do.
Just worth pointing out, I know David De Gea, we've seen penalty shootouts with David De Gea in goal before. I'm not always at United games, but I have seen David De Gea save a penalty.
I have as well.
Yeah, I saw a save from Leighton Baines.
Yeah,
in a 2-1 win over Everton when Radamel Falcao, I believe, scored the winner. There's been a few others as well. He can do it.
Was it against Arsenal earlier a few years ago? And it was all that as well. As like, he doesn't save it, and then he gets in the bottom corner and he tips it round the post. So he does, but he's not a kind of like, he's not a goosey-loosey like mover on the line, is he? He's very, and I'm going to go one way or the other. And again, in the modern game, it's about trying to psych he
did have his own little notepad by the looks of it as well.
He did. I saw it. He had it down there, and of course that's normal now. I think all goalkeepers are giving that information for shootouts, and they would have looked at that earlier on. But you're still the second best in that scenario. Like, it's up to the goal scorer, is it up to the penalty taker to just slot it away from 12 yards? I always say that you should never really miss a penalty in that scenario, because you've only got to put it in one of the corners. And that's that. No goalkeeper can save it. So I'm never that bothered about that in that moment. A goalkeeper can only be a hero in that moment. But I think in the actual game itself, Robert Sanchez didn't have to make any real world-class save or top-class save in the game, did he? Let's be honest. United had opportunities.
I thought the Rashford deflection one was a really good save.
That was a good save. That was his moment. But I think there was 3 really, really good saves from De Gea in that, which I think are worthy of note of talking about and saying that not every goalkeeper makes that save. But I also understand that a lot of people think that goalkeepers are just trash and that they have to make that save because that's their job. So we hear that all the time, that they're supposed to do it. So why do we celebrate it? I think it can be as vital in a moment in a match as a goal for me, is that a goalkeeper can give you that intestinal fortitude with that one save and get you back on track and get everyone around him confident. I think that happened yesterday, especially with a kind of makeshift back 4 who might not be your first choices.
Any injury concerns? Bruno Fernandes roll his ankle.
Yeah.
Didn't uncharacteristically, actually. When he was taken off and I could see penalties on the horizon, I was like, oh, that's a mistake. But he rolled his ankle. He must have been ballooned up. He was trudging around a little bit. Hopefully United players can come through that. We'll talk about the Spurs game at the end of the show. We'll keep FA Cup for now. Any other players you want to give a mention to?
No, the 5 minutes before Bruno came off, you could totally see he was done. He couldn't move. He wasn't doing any of his midfield coverage at all. He just stopped And you can see that Ten Hag was very quick then to get him off. I agree with you. Like, you want him obviously in a penalty shootout, but you actually don't want him in a penalty shootout if he's injured and he's thinking about that and thinking about his ankle and having to manage that situation, because you could still miss, couldn't he? We've seen Bruno Fernandes miss penalties. So a big blow for United in the context of the rest of the season, but also now you're positioned better. You know you're in a cup final. We know what's going on with Spurs. We can talk about them in a minute. But you're in a much kind of more relaxed situation than maybe you were on the final whistle against Sevilla, which wasn't that long ago. You kind of feel just that little bit better about the squad momentum.
Yeah, let's obviously the final's not for 6 weeks yet, or however long, 5 weeks maybe.
Yeah.
Man City are in it. Man City play Arsenal on Wednesday to take the lead, or not take the lead, but take control of the Premier League title race, even though they're probably already in control of it already. Arsenal have to go to Newcastle. City are in the semi-final of the Champions League against Real Madrid. The treble is on the horizon for them. Obviously, United now have their chance to stop that happening.
Yes.
Would you prefer that was the case? I'm guessing so, right? But at the same time, you do run the risk of facing probably the best team in Europe at the moment, getting trounced in the FA Cup final. What is what is worse?
The most important thing, of course, get top four. That's it. Top four every day of the week. So that's the main thing for Man United, and Man United matters. But now you're in this cup final. The FA Cup final is 1 week before the Champions League final. And I then have flashbacks, Scott, to 99, because I'm old. So I remember 99, and I remember that week, and I remember a lot of the kind of turmoil. And I remember thinking United might lose all three trophies. We did the job against Tottenham Hotspur, ironically, in the final day of the season for that to win the Premier League. We went to the FA Cup final, absolutely trounced Newcastle. It was only 2-0, but we were all over them and they didn't have a chance. And Alan Shearer crying on the football pitch like, oh no, we've not won a trophy again. And then you look at the Champions League final, and let's be completely honest, Man United were absolutely awful in that game. Terrible. Bayern Munich with a better team. Bayern Munich hit the bar 6 times, and you win 2-1 because it's a miracle. So do I want to stop Manchester City miracles and maybe the final step in their evolution of this last 10 years? Because that's what it would be. This would be their project in complete mode, wouldn't it? You win the treble, you're champions of Europe, champions of England, champions of the known football universe, but you got to go through Man United to get it. Quite like that. I think we're the underdogs. And I think that the importance of this cannot be undersold and understated. I think I mentioned to you before about 1977. I was not there for that. I'm not that old. But the folklore off the back of that game for a Man United team who was struggling around relegation, had been relegated a couple of years before and come back up against a Liverpool team who were undoubtedly the best team in the world. And Man United somehow turned up at Wembley and took it away from them. And you can never, ever rewrite that bit of history, Scott. It's always there. So for me, this is about creating history and denying Man City their shot at immortality, because it couldn't be against anyone better, could it? Like, can you imagine? Like, if they were turning up against Brighton, this might be nowhere near as interesting. You would be expecting Haaland to score 3 overhead kicks and City win 6-0 and they just coast to another trophy. But the storyline here is actually more important than the silverware. It's more about, can Man United bring that one big performance and stop Man City? Doesn't matter how well you play, Scott, like 1999, win the game. That's the most important thing. And then even the trophy doesn't matter. Who cares about the FA Cup? It's about stopping Man City now winning the treble. And I'm not always like that as a fan. I don't look at other clubs. I don't really judge United on those things. But this is City. This is our noisy neighbour. This is the team that's embarrassed us for 10 years. Let's see if we can halt them having their greatest moment.
Do you, like, this is my take, right? Do you feel... let me substitute Man City out for Liverpool, right? Liverpool in their last 5 years have done it the way that have built it the right way. City have too, but obviously we know the context behind that. I don't enjoy watching Man City play. I don't. Like, to me, I just look at it and I think, well done. It's inauthentic. It's just not. It's not. Like, I look at Liverpool and I think, I would be like, my gut would be turning if this was Liverpool, because they've done it the right way. They've done it authentically. I'm going on record here.
You are going on record. I was just, as you're saying it, I'm thinking, this is going. This is actually like on tape. Scott's going out to the world. Like, people can pull this up in a few years' time and go, "Do you remember?" I get that quite a bit. People say that to me all the time. I would not use the word authenticity. Like, I watch Man City play and I enjoy them. And I enjoy them from a football context.
I gotta be honest.
I watch what they do and I look at the kind of tactical nature of it. And again, I think it's underrated what they do, how they control games, how they always manage to look at each zone of the attacking areas and outnumber teams. The work rate it takes to do that and the discipline is off the chart. And I think because we've seen it for so long now under Guardiola, it is just easy to ignore it. It's always the way in football. Some people appreciate one thing, some people appreciate another. Liverpool, and the heavy metal football style of, Jurgen Klopp, of course, I think it's more entertaining, but they haven't been as good as Man City over that 7 years. Like, they've been.
I'm not talking about this, by the way. I'm talking about the way that they've got there.
Well, I think that ultimately, if you look at the two projects, some people will look at the American ownership at Liverpool and rightfully make comparisons to the Glazers. There are definitely comparisons. They are from the same sect. And I think a lot of people look at Manchester City and see the sports washing for what it is, because it is sports washing. That's why they bought that football club. There's no point. There was never a thing in the Middle East where someone went, "Oh, you know what? I've been a big Man City fan my whole life, and I've got to buy this football club and help them back." It wasn't that thing. It's a sports washing project. So that's maybe where the authenticity comes into it. But I think on pure football terms, there hasn't been a better team in the world than Man City over the last 10 years. I think it's stretched a long period now. And I enjoy technical, tactical football. I do. That's, it's who I am. And football doesn't always have to be a slobber knocker, punch up fest, which I think, again, United fans have been used to that because that was the Fergie style. You lay a glove on us and we lay a glove on you. Those teams generally don't win things, Scott. The teams that win the biggest trophies are the best teams tactically and technically. It's just what it is. So I think like Guardiola's achievement of what he's done in the last few years, it is on a par really with how Fergie, his achievements at Man United. And you could say Man United really managed those situations well back in the day, because there was always a challenger. There was always an Arsenal. There was always like a Chelsea at times. There was always like someone else coming up the rails. City, on the other hand, have kind of done the same. Like, Liverpool have gone this way, and I don't think are very good anymore. You look at City, they've maintained their standards somehow through Guardiola's insistence on this style of football. I like it. I don't think they play tiki-taka either. It's not like Barcelona 15 years ago, which I thought was boring. Like when they beat us in the Champions League final twice with Messi. To me, that was a boring style of football, but it was effective. And it was Spanish football, and I covered La Liga. But I think now when you look at what Guardiola's doing, the evolution of Man City, he's influenced every part of the English game. Everything we talk about now, technically, tactically, everything we talk about Man United can and can't do comes from the hand and the handwriting of Pep Guardiola. That is the truth. Talk about goalkeepers playing out from the back. No one was bothered about that 6 years ago, Scott. It's Guardiola. So those things, to me, I think are worth credit and worth highlighting. And I hope to God that we beat them at Wembley and stop their finest moment, and they don't have that in their locker for the rest of the time.
From finest moments to worst moments, we'll switch attention to the Premier League, because Man United's next opponent is Spurs, and they were absolutely smashed by Newcastle on Sunday. Man United go to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Thursday night, and we know that United have gone to top half rivals and not even taken a point so far this season. That was from a few weeks ago. Maybe the top 10's changed around since then. That's generally the rule, is that United don't turn up for these games and they falter under atmosphere or pressure or all of this. Erik ten Hag says it's not the case, but you look at the results and United tend not to do well away at rival grounds. But Tottenham are a mess. So what I will say here is United are currently 4th in the league after Newcastle's win over Spurs 6-1 on Sunday. United had 2 really good results on Sunday because obviously they won their own game, and Newcastle beating Spurs was the favoured result really in terms of United's top 4 push, because that's now 2 games that United have in hand over Tottenham and a 6-point advantage over them they also have as well. Liverpool have a game in hand on Spurs and would go level on points with them. Brighton are also in the mix, where they got a very, very difficult run in down in 8th. So really, United are going into this game now. I said it before one of the games they lost recently, Newcastle. Just don't lose.
Mm-hmm.
That's my position here. But honestly, with how bad Spurs are at the moment, they've got to be going into this and winning it.
They've got to have that mentality about it. But I still think that from a professional standpoint, don't lose. Like, that's the most important thing here. Games are running out. Manage the situation, manage the fallout before it happens. That's the kind of way I look at it. But you're right. I think the things with Man United, and maybe looking at the Tottenham game, is that you could still see yesterday there was just a ton of players carrying injuries. So this is going to impact you in the weeks ahead. It's just impossible not for it to. How do you mitigate disasters and problems? I think when you look at Tottenham, there's no doubt that what happened against Newcastle, you see there one team on the rise with Newcastle and feeling good, and one team without their manager playing a completely new system. I think the interim, what's his name? I've forgotten his name. The interim coach. Cellini, yeah. He was interviewed before and he went, yeah, this team, my players can play 4-3-3. It's a European system. All players can play 4-3-3. It's not a problem. And they went out there, played 4-3-3, and it was like a bludgeon horror movie, wasn't it? And Newcastle just took them to task. So does that mean Man United are going to turn up at Tottenham and it's going to be an easy day at the office? No, I don't think it is, because they've still got Harry Kane. And Harry Kane showed in that Newcastle game, he had that one moment, he buries the ball. And again, in a game of football that's level or even, that's all you need. You don't know that striker, put the ball in the net from 5, 10, 15, 20 yards, and you can win 1-0. And the story's a different story, isn't it? So I think United now have to really stage manage the rest of the season, Scott. They really do. They've got to be aware that as much as they want to go out there and dominate games and be the best version of themselves and all of that cliche rubbish, you need to be professional. Go out there and manage the situation and suffocate Tottenham. Don't let them play. Tottenham will go back to playing 3 at the back. I'm sure they will, like they did at the end yesterday against Newcastle. And there's every chance with a puncher, with Harry Kane, that they knock you out with one shot. You might have that's how it works. We saw it with Sevilla. We wouldn't have expected Man United to concede 5 goals against a team from La Liga who are 13th, would we? So always the unexpected could happen. But I think Man United have got enough to manage the situation, especially if Lindelof and Luke Shaw can play games together now going forward. And I think you cannot underestimate how important that centre-back partnership will be on the day.
It's a really important couple of games coming up in the league for United, because obviously the FA Cup final now isn't until start of June. There are 8 games left. I think United have 8 games left. Their next 2 are against the 2 teams directly below them. So Spurs and Aston Villa.
Yeah.
If they take 6 points from these 2, that's going to go a hell of a long way to securing top 4.
Win a few games, it's done. This is it now. There is no kind of like the mathematics that actually need doing. United have got 2 games in hand on Tottenham, win those 2 games, and it's pretty much done. You're there. So it's good that United have positioned themselves, Scott, at this point of the season to be where they are. It kind of makes you look backwards sometimes. You think, God, we could have got this done a lot earlier. Like, we could have really been several points onwards when you think about the start of the season, the middle of the season, and where we were a few weeks ago. But this is why I always say that the Premier League campaign is the barometer of how good you are. Because Man United have had loads of hiccups this year, Scott, and yet you're still in the top 4. And not comfortable, but you're close, aren't you? Got to an FA Cup final. We talk about that now. And you've won a trophy. So what United fans got to be down about? This is the thing, isn't it? So you've got to try and look at the campaign as a whole, I think, always about whether it's been successful. I think United are very, very close now to kind of ticking that box for the season and saying, yep, it's been a successful campaign.
Yes, like we say, we'll do another show, which we'll record in a second and release it on Wednesday, I believe. just before the Tottenham game. But we'll take a bit of a broader look at the situation at United for that one. Any final thoughts, Rob, on what we've discussed today? Obviously, pretty pivotal week, actually. This is, as we just mentioned. Any final takeaways for you?
No, I think just the sense that it was good that United got back on the bike and rode it yesterday. And I think the statistic I think that jumps out at me is that now that is 8 times this year United have lost a game and won the next game straight afterwards. So we talk a lot, don't we, about psychology and whether they've got the bottle or whether they've got the nous or whether they want it. That shows that there's a discipline growing at Man United, because you're going to need that, Scott, in the years ahead, that when you have adversity, that you then don't have 6 weeks of bad results, because that's what Man United have been for a very, very long time. So delighted with the cup victory, simply because it meant that you did your job and you felt good about that. Great to have those moments, as we said, Wout kissing the ball and doing his knee slide, and Victor Lindelof having a special moment, putting the ball in the top corner with a fantastic penalty to win it. But overall, just so pleased that it doesn't feel like the season's just hit the skids, because that's how it felt against Sevilla. It felt like, oh, is this it now? Are we going to completely just capitulate? And it feels, even with the injuries, that isn't the case.
Yes, indeed. Get in touch with us on Twitter @_Scott Saunders, @_Rob_P, and @PromiseAndMU for the show. Get us on YouTube. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, The Promise and the Manchester United Podcast. Like, comment, subscribe, notification bell, all those kind of things. Usually Tuesdays and Fridays, but this week we'll do 3 shows for you. So we'll be back on Wednesday. I'm Scott Saunders. That has been Rob Blanchette for another Promise and podcast. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Things are looking up again. We'll wait and see just how long it's going to take until we start cursing again. But hopefully, there's no other massive hiccups like United have suffered throughout the course of the season to come throughout the remainder of it. So we'll see you soon for another Promise and podcast. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We'll see you soon.